to another episode of Subject to Change. This is Chad.
And this is Matt.
And today we're going to talk about political engagement. We're going to talk about how politically engaged we are. We're going to talk about how politically engaged we think people ought to be in general. And I think, to start things off, we should probably define what we mean by political engagement, because I'm not even sure that I mean the same thing by that you do.
That I do. Do you want me to go first?
Yeah, let's hear what you have to say about it.
Okay, so I think political engagement revolves around how willing you are to, I guess, be informed about the politics that are related to your life. Like, how much you want to discuss politics with other people, how much you want to read into political policy, how much you want to know about the politicians that you're going to vote for, and just in general, the level of which you want to be engaged with the political system in your country, whatever it is. That could be activism, political activism, being a pundit, being someone who's just energized by the politics that they fit into their own life and want to show that to other people, or just how informed you are of the politics, whether or not you want to engage with other people, but just how informed you are of the politics that your country's involved in, what your politicians do, and things like that.
So we're not talking about a specific behavior or set of behaviors. It can be several. It can be one or more of several different things.
Yeah. I think it is that political engagement isn't. It's more of a blanket term of a bunch of different things that you can do related to the politics that you live in.
Yeah. Okay. I think we should maybe start with some examples, though. They don't have to be specific examples of things that we do, but just so that we're not talking at cross purposes here.
Sure.
So being involved in a political campaign itself would count.
Yeah.
Keeping up with the news, does that count?
Yeah, I'd say that even just knowing something about politics is a level of engagement. It's a low level of engagement, but you're still like above the person who doesn't even know, let's say, who's running for president, or who your own representatives are.
Okay. Or reading books, having conversations about politics.
Yeah. It's a sliding scale, I think. You could go from the bare minimum, well, I'd say from no engagement, like where you don't even know where you fall politically.
Right.
And then, slowly sliding up towards, being a politician, which I think is the most politically engaged you can.
Yeah, if it's your career, or if it's something that you're dedicating your life to, your career to. Yeah, okay, that sounds good. That's pretty good. I think that's a good place to start.
Yeah. You wouldn't contradict, because you said that you think that we might have differing ideas.
I don't think I would contradict that. Yeah, I just didn't want to nail it down to certain things.
Yeah, to certain attributes.
I didn't want to say, you're not politically engaged unless you're following the news 24/7 or something like that.
No. I definitely think that it's a sliding scale of like a level of engagement. You could be 1% engaged, 100%, 50%, and what you do can show like your level of engagement.
Okay. Yeah, okay, that makes a lot of sense. So I think the rest of the conversation then is going to be, we're going to talk about where we are on this sliding scale, and then approximately.
And I think what we think is appropriate.
Yes. Okay. That sounds good.
Do you want to start with yours, or do you want me to start with... I think we should start with yours, because mine would be a little bit more exhaustive, I think.
Okay, let's...
Unless you want to do it a different way.
No, let's just start.
Objection.
Let me just list off a couple things I don't do first. So I don't really follow the news closely, especially not the daily news.
So like mass media.
Correct.
Okay.
Right.
Like the CNNs, the ABCs,
I don't
the
watch
Foxes.
That stuff.
Yeah.
I don't really even read current events.
Like
online.
New York Times, Washington Post.
I try not to get too much news on Facebook and social media, because that's not a very good place to get it. And yet I find myself being aware of most of the news anyway, even though I don't seek it out. So I don't really seek out the news. I don't follow it. I have done that at different points in my life. The last election cycle, I was pretty dialed in every day.
The 2016?
Yeah.
Or the 2018?
2016.
2016.
Yeah. And we talked about it a lot back then, too. But that was the last time that I was... Well, no, I shouldn't say that. That was a good example, though, of a time when I was much more politically engaged than I am right now.
Yeah.
So I don't do that. I'm not actively involved in any political campaign or activism, nor do I want to be. My political engagement involves more...
Knowing where you stand on issues?
Yeah, that's a good way to put it. It involves... That's one of the things. It involves trying to figure out where I stand on the issues so that when it comes down to it, and when I can actually affect something, I know what to do.
Yeah. So you know where to cast your vote.
Right. Or it doesn't have to be that. It can be something that I actually take part in some community, whether that's a workplace or within the family or anything where I am going to be directly affected or involved in politics. Mm-hmm. I want to know where I stand, and I want to know as much about it as I can. So when it comes down to it, when it really matters, I know what to do, and I know,
and that your views will align, or if they don't align with a certain situation, that you can either bow out or tune in.
And so I would say that I'm more interested in the more philosophical aspects of politics as opposed to the daily grind. I'm more interested in, more lasting debates, such as, free markets versus socialism. That doesn't have anything to do with a particular candidate or a particular election, although it can.
Yeah.
That's just a general, I would say, philosophical or existential issue.
And or like your discussion, like our brief discussion about rights.
Yeah. I want to know where I stand on stuff like that. And so, instead of following the news, instead of being directly involved in any kind of activism, I read books. I have a lot of conversations, such as this one. I have these with a couple other people in my life, although most people aren't really interested in talking about most of the stuff that I want to talk about. Although, just little things here and there that I get people to talk about count too. And just thinking about it myself, I do a lot of thinking and personal writing about political issues and philosophical issues, and so I would say that I'm not a person who looks politically engaged, and I do sometimes feel detached from
the current
events,
the week to week kind of what's going on.
And I'm not sure that that's a bad thing.
I mean, that's part of the discussion we're going to have.
Yeah, it is. So that's about it for me.
Okay.
So how about you?
Well, I'd say for the majority of my life, even like my first level of political engagement when I turned 18. That was when Obama was first running for president back in 2008, and when I could actually have some sort of political view and it actually matter because I was old enough to vote.
Right.
But then, the idea that, especially with Democrats, or I mean, probably with Democrats and Republicans, that as soon as you vote in your party, you kind of just dismiss, and it's like, everything's just going to work the way I expect it to, and you don't really stay politically engaged. And that's how I was for a long time. I'd vote for who I wanted to vote for, and then once the elections were over and everything was done, I'd completely just say, no, that's over. I don't have to worry about that anymore. I did that for a long time.
Okay.
But then in the 2015, 2016 election cycle, I really started to see, the impact that politics has. I really started to look at it more seriously, and instead of just like dismissing it like a lot of people do, saying my vote doesn't count, my views don't matter, things aren't going to change, being very dismissive. I decided to be more politically engaged. So I watched more news. I watched more debates, especially around the presidential campaign. I watched more videos. I tried to learn more and more as I could about the candidates who are running to align with how you described your own political views that you've kind of figured out over time, and that you kind of that you try to build and grow, and trying to figure out what you truly believe in. For me, it was trying to align how I felt or to even kind of morph my views based on what was being talked about, like what the current, political milieu was, I suppose. Trying to figure out how I would fit into the current political system because I was trying to be more engaged. And in that cycle, I was a Bernie supporter. And I tried to, and we talked about this before on a different podcast about how you don't necessarily as much want to educate people with the podcast or with our discussions, but how I am leaning more towards wanting to do that, and how I have, we were talking about discussions, our first conversation about, if we ever got into conversations where things were hard. And I talked about how I got into political arguments with people and how I swayed a couple people in their views because I was, trying to actually persuade them with my, level of political engagement, and that kind of waned as Hillary Clinton got the nomination, and just kind of the defeatist view kind of came back. But then once Trump got elected, I feel like a lot of the country, me included, became more politically engaged because they wanted to keep an eye on what the hell was going on. And since then, I've had more of a political eye. I've tried to keep up with current events. I've tried to keep up with what's going on with the markets, with politics here and abroad, which I've always had an interest in foreign politics. Mm-hmm. Like through channels like the Japanese NHK. I used to watch their news a lot, and the BBC and things like that, to try and get a more worldly view of the political system. And as we're going into the 2019-2020 election of president, being more politically engaged, not necessarily listening to mainstream media because it is very corrupted and biased, but listening to more independent news. Mm-hmm. Engaging in conversations via independent news on Twitter and things like that, and just trying to stay in the where you are more detached from the current things in the day-to-day. I try to keep up with it just so I know how things are flowing. Just to know how the polls are looking, how candidates, especially with the presidential election, how candidates are going in and out of discussions in their debates in their different town halls, and just like trying to keep up with the good and the bad, just so I know that I keep myself informed of what's going on, so I don't go into the 2020 election not knowing enough. And I feel like that kind of level of engagement is going to hopefully persist in me, because I'm interested in, history. It's one of my big things. And, politics is a huge part of that, how countries are run, how they interact with each other on the world stage, and what we do now and what we have done affects the future and all that sort of thing. And that level of impact has finally kind of really seeded itself in me. And I realize that I care more now than I ever have.
Yeah. I have a question for you. So, about your interest and your engagement with the more current events and the day-to-day news. As you said, you're more engaged with that than I am.
Yeah.
Would you say that that's more? Would you say that you're engaged in that? How much of that is because you're interested in it, and how much of that is because you think it's the right thing to do, or like you feel obligated?
Feel obligated? I'd say, I'd probably split it down the middle. Is that I want to know what's going on in the world around me. I'm not stuck in this bubble of my life. I actually got into a long conversation with a friend about this.
I did read that.
You read bits and pieces of it, or all of it.
Yeah.
And how my friend was saying, I've got my life to live.
Right.
Nothing that I do matters. I'm just going to wash my hands of the whole thing. And I'm trying to tell him, that's not the attitude you should have.
Yeah.
You need to be more engaged, especially in this situation, if you have these very stark issues with the system, which he did.
Yeah.
And I'm saying that by washing your hands of the situation and walking away, that's not a good thing. Mm-hmm. And I think being up to date with what's going on in the day-to-day or the week-to-week or whatever keeps you, informed of what's going on.
Yeah.
Which I do take an interest in it just because of the political atmosphere that we're in. But I also think it's behoove me to know what's going on as a person who is politically engaged and who wants to be informed. Now, do I think that sometimes you can get bogged down in that? Yes. Sometimes it feels like I'm hearing the same, because I listen to like five different outlets.
Okay.
But they all generally kind of go around the same stories. Eventually.
For sure.
So, I hear one person talk about some scandal or some poll or some, thing, and then the next four people talk about the same thing, but just a little tweak.
Yeah.
It starts to get redundant.
There's kind of diminishing returns on that stuff,
exactly.
Right?
So you have to decide how much you want to engage. For me, I have to decide how much I want to engage day to day, or whether or not I already know what they're talking about, because I'm up with it like they are.
Right.
They're getting their information about the same time as I am. They're just
Yeah.
Sending it out to their audience.
Right.
Where, I'm not relying on them necessarily. I'm, I'm curious about their opinions. Mm-hmm. I'm curious about, their take on things. And I know that, especially if they're going to talk about stations I don't watch, like the mass media,
right,
that they're going to have an opinion on that as well, which is something that I wouldn't get normally.
Yeah, okay. There's a couple different places we could go from there, I guess. One of them, maybe we should save this for later, but one of them is that I read the little debate you had with your friend on Facebook the other day, and I didn't entirely agree or disagree with either one of you, but I do think that where I did agree with him, though, is in the I'm going to take care of what I can take care of.
Yeah.
So I think we should talk about that at some point. What was the other thing I was going to bring up, though?
Well,
I know what the other thing I was going to bring up.
Okay.
I was going to say that, for me anyway, I have almost no use for the pundits anymore.
True.
So, as an example, there was a Democratic debate last night, and I didn't watch it, but if I did, I wouldn't really have much use for what anybody else said about it. Anybody in the news. I mean, I would talk about that with Matt.
Yeah.
And people that I talk to in real life. But I would have almost no use for the pundits or the news. I don't need the secondary. I watched the thing myself, and I don't need it filtered through somebody else who's trying to twist it to fit their agenda anyway.
Which a lot of that happened last night.
Yeah, I know it. I used to do that, and I got so tired of other people
telling you your opinion.
Right, yeah.
Or how you should have viewed the thing.
Exactly.
And we can get into that first point in a second, but just to go back on that, the whole pundit thing, the mass media, where a lot of the pundits are. I mean, what I listen to on Facebook or on YouTube, the independent media, they are pundits.
Right.
Essentially. They talk about politics. It's, their view. They are putting the facts out there, but they obviously do it in a different way because they're not beholden to the same strictures that the mass media are.
Right.
So their views are slightly different. So to me, they seem more genuine, and we could argue that too. But
yeah, that's fair.
But the one of the first things, I mean, I did watch the debate, the third Democratic debate, and one of the first things I heard from the pundits after it was over was they were talking about how Joe Biden is our nominee, as if he's already been chosen.
Yeah.
Those were the words coming out of their mouth, and I'm like...
And you disagreed with that.
Well, it's did you even watch the debate?
Right, were you watching the same debate?
Did you hear the words coming out of his mouth, how incoherent and, belligerent he was?
Yeah.
And you're saying, our nominee, and how is he, he's going to go up against Trump, and I'm like, hello? That kind of stuff, it's you're putting... When they do things like that, they're being disingenuous, which is a huge thing that a lot of pundits do. On Fox News, on CNN, pretty much everywhere.
That's almost the whole point of that.
Exactly. Is that they put their spin on it to try to change public opinion or to give people their own opinion, like to give people their opinion.
Right.
Because some people who aren't as, inoculated to that kind of talking will just say, oh, they're right,
Yeah.
It's like, well, someone like me or someone who, maybe even like you, you're not in the day-to-day, but you have your own strong beliefs. If you listen to it, you'd say, well, Joe Biden, he was bumbling over his own words. He could barely get the ideas out. And then they say, oh, this is his best night yet. Like, were you watching the same thing that I was watching?
I hope not.
It's like, yeah, are you're just trying to push this narrative, which is a big thing about mass media.
Right.
All mass media is that they have their...
It's very narrative-based.
Yeah, they have their narrative that they have to stick to. And, people like Bernie Sanders bring up that, the pharmaceutical companies, they have a stake in these corporations, the CNNs and the ABCs and the MSNBCs. They put money into those corporations and then there's ties there. So obviously the narrative is going to change. Whether or not they call them up and say, don't run this or run that is irrelevant. The fact that there is a tie with money directly changes the narrative. But
yeah, and I mean, you mentioned this about what I was trying to do, and that is exactly what I'm trying to do. I'm trying to cultivate my own beliefs so that I don't have to rely on people like that. Yeah. And I think I've been there for a while, even though my own views are still changing on everything. But it was something that I noticed in the last election cycle, that the impression that I got from watching the debates and from listening to the candidates was very different from what the media was saying.
Yeah.
And that was when I lost almost all faith in traditional media at that point in time. And so since then, I've basically ignored it.
Yeah.
And I think I'm better off for it.
I agree that most people are.
Yeah.
But the fact that most people don't see it that way, they say, everyone on the left says Fox News is bad. Everyone on the right says CNN is bad. Right. And then the people who, really look at the whole situation and realize that both are terrible.
Yeah. Yeah. I have no use for the Sean Hannity's of the world or the Rachel Maddow's of the world. Like, they're both those are the same kind of person, in my opinion.
Yeah.
Like, there's very little difference between them.
But to your first point, if you want to go into that, I tried to get on the same page. We're going back to the conversation I had with my friend, and he talked about how he wanted to care about his own first, and I understand that.
Right.
Not everyone can be as... And I think this is going to get into our conversation of what we think is an adequate level of political engagement.
It directly involves that.
Yeah, so I think that's where we're shifting gears to. But with him, I was trying to show him, especially, if this was the 90s or the 80s or what have you, I might not be as politically engaged myself, and I might say, it's okay. You're living your life... you've got your mortgage, you've got your family, you've got your job, just voting when voting comes, that's fine. But, the big sweep that I've felt recently, that a lot of people in this country have felt recently, is that there needs to be some sort of political revolution. That's the one thing that's been happening a lot, especially on the left, like the far left. In the progressive side, is that there needs to be some sort of political revolution, and people need to get out and actually be involved for things to change. The inequality, the state of climate change, all of these things that aren't getting done. That if you want change, which he talks about in our discussion about how he hates how the system is, he hates how the Democrats and the Republicans both don't give a shit.
Your friend is...
My friend said this, yeah. And how, he feels like the American people are too far gone. They can't be helped.
Right.
Like, the system isn't giving him a reason to get out of, get into the political bed, essentially.
Yeah.
And my argument for him was, A, when you say you love America but not its people, you're wrong, because America is its people. And two, did I say A and two? I think I just did. Anyway.
One and
B.
B.
A and B. B is that if you really feel like things have gone that bad and they need to have a systemic change, doing nothing and just saying, I'm going to wash my hands of the whole thing and just care about myself is disingenuous. Is that if you feel like things are bad enough, you need to say something. You need to help change it. And when he said, the system isn't giving me a reason, I actually quoted him on this. So the system isn't giving me a reason. He says, that's the whole point. You're supposed to force the system. you're supposed to impose the change. That's where it comes from. It comes from us as the people.
Yeah.
And I really wanted him to see that his idea of just letting it all go and not being politically engaged at all, like putting that scale to 0 and just walking away, is negative for our engagement as we the people. Mm-hmm. And I tried to get that to him, and eventually he relented to a point and said that he would actually watch the debate, because we were having a discussion about watching the Democratic debate and just his political engagement and how I wanted him to be a little bit more engaged than what he was saying he was.
Yeah. If you want my take on that, I'm not completely in agreement with your friend on that, and I mean, I don't want to say too much about him because I didn't read the conversation that closely, but I think it's probably fair for you to say that if you do think things are so bad that you should be more involved in trying to make them better. I think I agree with that. But see, that's not what I think, though. I think I'm much more...
You don't think things have gotten that bad?
Right, I don't. I actually... It's kind of weird for me to say this because I don't consider myself an optimist, but I think I'm more optimistic than you are, at least, about the political situation. And, I mean, I am much more of the belief that I should focus my energy, for the most part, on my own life and the lives of my loved ones, the people that I care about, that I should focus my energy on the things that I can control the most. And I have very little control. I have very little influence on the political system, on the government. And so, I basically think I should pay attention to it and put energy in it in proportion to
what you can change,
what I can change, which is very little. And so I do only put very little time and energy into paying attention to it. And in large part because I just don't have infinite time.
Yeah.
If I had more time and energy, if I wasn't constrained by my own biology, I would pay more attention and be more involved probably. But there's only so much time I have in my life and only so much time I have in a day. And I would prefer to spend that time on things that I have more control over. And so that's where I relate to your friend saying, he's got a family, he's got kids, he probably has very little free time. And so I totally understand. And I actually think it's probably the right thing to do for him to focus more on that stuff. Now whether, the other part of it's a little bit
muddy.
Whether, that he thinks things are that bad. But I also, it's hard to blame him for that too. But I don't want to get too much into that specific debate.
Well, I think there's sort of a correlation between how bad you think things are and need to change and how much you are willing to be involved. And he talked about, I won't say his name, but he talked about how he's very anti-Trump. And he thinks that Trump supporters are terrible people and, that whole wing of America is just too far gone, they can't be helped.
Yeah.
And doesn't want to think about it. And I tried to frame it. I didn't do this till the very end, but I wanted to frame it in a way that wanted to wake him up and say, they are politically engaged.
Yeah.
They are the ones who got out and changed things the way that they wanted to. Whether or not it was good or bad, they did the work. Mm-hmm. They voted in Trump. They went out and, did the political revolution that they thought needed to happen.
Right.
And if you're on the other side saying that this is bad, we need to get back to what's good, you can't just walk away. And that's what I was trying to instill in him, is that I'm the type of person, I brought up Hong Kong and how they're having their political revolution right now in relation to their relationship with China and, their own sovereignty and all these, political things. And I didn't want to shame him, but I was like, I don't, if I was in Hong Kong, if I was a Hong Konger, I would be out on the streets.
Yeah, okay.
I would be a part of that political revolution because I see the importance in that change like they do. And he didn't say whether or not he would be. Actually, I think he said that if he was in Hong Kong, he would be, but he doesn't think that level of engagement is viable in America. He doesn't
think it's a good analogy.
Yeah, he said that, if there was only a couple million people in America and they were all aligned, that we could do that. And I'm like, that's the point, is that you have to start somewhere. Not everyone in America believes in the same thing. We've talked about how we don't have the same views on consensus. and the levels of consensus, so whether consensus is good or bad, or
Right.
in making decisions. But if you want things to change, you have to build some sort of consensus. And starting from zero and saying we can't get anywhere is nowhere to get any change. Is no way to get any change.
Yeah.
If you want things to change, you have to start building a conversation. You have to build a movement, and that's what I think a big thing about political revolutions, or revolutions in general, is that they have to start somewhere with some sort of ideal. And if you think, in his case, if you think everything's so bad that the system is broken, that it doesn't work, that he doesn't buy into what the Democrats say, he doesn't buy into the Republicans say, there's nothing I can do, you have to find the people who agree with you, because there are. And you have to form a coalition, like these grassroots movements, and make a change. You have to build it from the ground up. And and when he kept saying, the system isn't giving me a reason, the system isn't giving me a reason, that's not how it works.
Yeah. This is, I don't know, we could pretty quickly here get into some fundamental disagreements between us. And I don't know if we should do that or save it for a different time, but I think one of the reasons why I don't feel like, one of the reasons why I'm not revolutionary in the first place, and one of the reasons why I don't think that some kind of drastic change needs to happen, is because I don't really believe in the whole idea that the government exists to solve our problems.
Yeah.
And I think that's the difference between us, right? Would you agree with that?
I'd say that, well, I think in a perfect world, we would be able to solve our problems with little government intervention, right?
With little
government intervention.
Okay.
Communities would be able to sufficiently work for their people, and the government would only really need to step in if things went anarchy.
Okay.
The way that the system works now is communities can't work for themselves. It's such a twisted and tied system. Where the Democrats try to do social programs, but they've only been detrimental, and the Republicans try to take things away, and it's just this back and forth of just so much toxic shit where general upheaval just needs to happen, where some pressure needs to be released. That's where I feel. But I feel like giving too much power to the government is a bad thing, like the Patriot Act or things like that. Like the quote-unquote Republican version of too much government control. Right. Where we give away our own civil liberties for protection. Security, but then there's too much government. What one of his qualms was that people are living on the system. Like there's lazy people. They buy into this social society where you don't have to do it. The welfare state, right? Which is also detrimental. I don't like that either. Right.
Yeah. And nobody does.
Yeah, and I tried to paint that to him. It's like I'm not saying I'm pro-Democrat, because I actually changed what I believe. I'm an independent now. Yeah. And Bernie is an independent, but he's only running Democrat so he can actually get a shot.
Because he has to.
Yeah, but the view that because he kept saying that I was trying to buy into this democratic view of the world, and that's not true. Yeah. I believe, if we want to bring in, if I want to bring in another presidential candidate, the Andrew Yang view, that if you just give the modern person a little bit of help, then they can do a lot more. Yeah. With his UBI plan. Yeah. And not necessarily taking away all the rest of the social safety net, but trying to get away from that. Instead of living on the system, we give you a boost so you can, help yourself. The whole lifting yourself up, the whole American dream thing. I like that idea. But since the system currently downplays the poor and only lifts up the rich, like the dichotomy of good and bad, and like the poor and the rich, it just keeps getting worse and worse and worse. Yeah. And that's where I think where the revolution needs to come in, to kind of balance the scales. But what I think needs to be done is more drastic than what you think.
Yeah. Well, I think we even disagree that
needs to happen.
Well, we even disagree that is happening, I think. Yeah. But so that we don't get too much into that, how much do you feel you personally are affected by politics? Like, how much do you feel limited by politics? Let me say that.
Limited by politics?
Yeah, because you're saying that communities don't work and all this stuff. Like, how much do you think that actually affects you?
Well, I mean, just a very blanket thing of being a white male in America, it can't, disenfranchise me as much as it can, people of color or women or things like that.
Yeah, you buy that?
Do I buy that?
Yeah.
In some circumstances, yeah.
Yeah. Okay.
Like criminal justice, that whole system where people of color disproportionately get more sentencing than white people, men more than women. That's more on the side that men are worse off than women, not better. That's not really. That's not a privilege. A privilege, men get more jail time. But no. But anyway, do I think it's like as bad as like the SJW say? No. Do I think that there are problems that need to be fixed? Yes. Are we fixing them in the right way? No. Are there better ways we can do it? Yes.
Okay. But anyway,
how much do I feel disenfranchised?
Yeah. You personally.
I think that the fact that, one of the big things for me is college education. If it was cheaper, I feel like then I would have been open to more opportunity in life, and I feel like that's true for anybody.
Yeah.
Regardless of skin color or whatever. But I think on a grander scale, not pertaining simply to me, because I'm not buying into the idea that climate change is real, because I believe the science, but the detrimental sides of the politics and related to progress in those ways, I think affect us all, me included. We could be in a society that is cleaner, that is striving for success in multiple endeavors that don't endanger our own species. And I think the politics related to climate change, to the money in politics where lobbyists and corporations buy votes, where, a state like we live in, Kentucky, run by Mitch McConnell, we have one of the lowest wages for workers. The whole eastern part of the state is, bankrupt because, that's where the coal states were. The coal counties are in Appalachia. Education is terrible in our state. And that's all tied back to the politics. If we had politicians in our country, in our state specifically, who cared about the education of our citizens, who cared about the welfare of our students, of our families, of the economy in the state in general, they would be more inclined to go towards these progressive views that would get us off coal mining, which is detrimental to the workers because they die disproportionately. We would increase education levels for all of the students so that Kentucky would be a state that can compete with, the Californias and the Massachusetts of the country, where they have all these like really big, wealthy places and schools, and, just increasing the health and wealth of the people in the state, increasing wages so that people don't have to live in trailer parks for generations. So people don't have to go to these bad backwater podunk schools that don't get them on the track of success so that they can get out or to succeed. I think that's tied directly to the money that's flowing into the state through like these Republican lobbies and through people like Mitch McConnell, who have taken dark money and just kind of shooed away all these problems that Kentuckians have.
Yeah. Yeah. I think I agree that it's possible to attempt to solve those problems through politics anyway, but I don't know. I think a lot of those aren't necessarily political problems. And I think that's part of why I am less politically engaged than you are. Because I don't necessarily think that a lot of those are political problems. Or at least they're not problems that can be solved. They're not problems that are best solved through politics, through legislation, through electing different leaders. Well, I just don't think that that's the best way to solve most of the problems of the world, to be honest.
Well, would you say that those problems are detrimentally affected by the politics?
Yeah, probably.
Like in a negative way? Like they can't be fixed with politics, but they're made worse through politics. Would you say that?
I think so, yes. Which leads it...
but I'm saying that...
Yeah, I think so.
A different politics is... Yeah. What I'm saying is... I guess what my viewpoint on that is that the current politics are making it worse. Mm-hmm. Different politics could potentially make it better, in my view. You're saying that less politics in general would make it better.
I think so.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah.
I think that's where the big rub between the two of us.
I think
anyway,
so. Yeah.
Is that I keep saying this to you, and you could change this, but your more libertarian view of more hands-off government.
Yeah.
Let the people make their decisions and all that sort of thing. And I think I kind of agree with that. I like small government, but I think we're at the point now where the drastic change needs to come from somewhere, and it won't come just from. It will come from grassroots movements, but it has to be backed by a government that supports those movements. Mm-hmm. Like, the coal miners right now, who I haven't heard anything recently, and I've been keeping up with the politics.
Yeah.
From Black Jewel in Appalachia and other parts of the country, the company that went bankrupt, and the last paycheck to all of their workers bounced. Mm-hmm. So they've been protesting by keeping a train from delivering its coal in Kentucky.
Yeah.
As far as I know, they're still there.
Yeah.
And
I haven't heard anything about that.
The politics of coal and, natural gas and fossil fuels is keeping that alive.
Yeah.
If the political system would just back off and let progress happen, then I would be all for it.
Yeah, okay.
But the problem is that the political system we have in place isn't letting it happen. Mm-hmm. It hasn't been letting it happen for the past 40 years, where, we've known since the 80s at least that climate change is a bad thing. We have to get off fossil fuels. We have to go to something more renewable. People, solar panels, wind turbines, these things have been being built and being implemented for the past 20, 30 years. But the fossil fuel corporations and system that is influencing our government and our politics has hindered that. Mm-hmm. But the only way to get that out is to get a new system of government in that pushes all that crap out. Mm-hmm. So it's kind of this catch-22. It's like I want less government so that they don't fuck up shit like that, so progress actually happens. Yeah. But we can't get to a place like that unless we have a new government in place to get rid of it. If that makes sense.
Yeah, it makes sense. I think. I'll just leave it.
It's like if Bernie Sanders got into office, mm-hmm. right, and we had a real blue wave, but it was a progressive blue wave and not a corporate Dem blue wave, then the country would start going towards progress. And if he started to say, well, this view, like, government can start backing off, then I would totally be for that.
Yeah. Do you think that would actually happen?
I'm not sure.
Yeah, because my impression is that that's not what happens.
I'm not sure. Never seen it, so in America.
I was going to back up somewhere. Now I can't remember where I was going to back up to.
Sorry.
Well, I think I was going to I was just going to say that I don't feel personally affected all that much by politics, which is a big reason why I don't think I am more involved in it.
Yeah, I think our level of existential view on the situation is different.
Yeah, I feel like almost all of my problems
are immediate.
They're my problems. So problems with me. They're not problems with. They're definitely not problems with the government. Although, I would also say that they're not problems with anybody else. They're not my boss's problems. They're not my girlfriend's problems. They're not problems with my family. They're problems with me.
Yeah,
they're up to me to fix. And that's much more what my philosophy is in general about this stuff. Yeah. And I guess I just wanted to say a little bit more about that. Like the stuff that your friend was saying on Facebook about taking care of your own little corner of the world. One of the things that I like about that is that I think it lets you properly calibrate yourself to the real problems in the world. So, like if I'm just getting involved with all of the whatever political issue comes my way, without paying any attention to whether it's affecting me or how it's involving me in my life, that doesn't give you any indication of how much of a problem that really is. Because I think you'd agree that there are all kinds of people out there making noise about problems that you don't think are problems, right?
Yeah, I would agree.
And I agree with that too. And so I think there's like there's hundreds of potential political issues out there that people are talking about. Some of them I think really matter, some of them don't. I think a good way to figure out which ones matter is to see which ones affect my life. Yeah. And I understand that my life isn't everybody's life, and my life isn't the average life. But if everybody did that, then we could solve the actual problems in the world without being distracted by the noise, by the problems that aren't real problems.
See, I actually would say the opposite is true. I think that if too many people think that, well, a lot of these problems really don't affect me, even the big things, like, let's say I live in the middle of Ohio.
Yeah.
Climate change wouldn't really affect me. You know, the seas can rise, my house is still going to be here. You know, the temperature might get a little hotter, but things won't be that bad. You know, like, and they start seeing, like, you know, I'm white, so the way that people of color are treated in certain scenarios, it doesn't really affect me.
Well, it affects. It doesn't. I'm not necessarily talking about things that directly affect me in some kind of like solipsistic, selfish way. I'm talking about the people that I know, the people that I care about.
Well, and I'm saying, but I'm saying a lot of people, it would probably get to that point where there's like, you know, about 90% of the things that people are worried about, don't affect me, so I'm not going to be involved. And I think a part of that, what I was trying to talk to, especially with my friend, is his level of empathy. Is that when you ask me if those things directly affect me, a lot of things don't.
Right.
But the fact that I know that they affect, you know, obviously, like we said, not everything affects me or is worth you know, fighting for. But knowing that a lot of things do affect a lot of other people, and it doesn't affect me, doesn't change the impact that those things have. And I think that your level of, I mean, obviously, like you talked about, worrying about your own corner, and which I commend. You know, I said the same thing to him. It's like, I understand your stance of being a family man and caring about your life and making sure things are in order, because that is important. You know, saying fuck you to them and only caring about the world isn't healthy. You have to find a good medium. And I was trying to show him that you can be engaged in your own life, but also have engagement in the rest of the world.
Yeah, I agree with that. I something I would ask you, though, is, are you just going to, do you just take it on other people's words that the problems they say are problems? Like, say something doesn't affect you directly, but you say, but if it affects all these people over here, how do you know that that's affecting those people over there? And that they're not just crying for attention? Or
I would just say cross-referencing. You know, like they're, you know, how do you get information about any problem? You know, you listen to the people who are crying foul, and then you listen to the people who are agreeing with them, the people who are disagreeing with them. And, you know, like you talked about how you're trying to figure out what you believe in. Yeah. You know, it's just this, you know, back and forth, and sometimes we're wrong. Yeah, okay. Sometimes, you know, people who are crying foul are lying. Okay. Or, you know, what they're saying isn't true, or what they're saying really isn't a problem. They're just trying to make it bigger than what it actually is. Yeah. You know, that whole vocal minority thing. Right. But sometimes the vocal minority is actually right. Right. And we just have to go based on our own views and, you know, look at what they're dealing with, see if it's something that can be fixed, something that needs to be fixed. And, you know, it's a case-by-case basis, generally. Like, I don't just immediately sign on to all of the leftist problems. Right. Like, that's not how I look at politics. Right. I really do look at it on a case-by-case basis on if it'll affect me in the future, if it'll affect people directly related to me, like, you know, in my own slice of life. But if it does affect people disproportionately and it doesn't essentially affect me, but it's something that needs to be changed. Yeah. And that's how I look at it too. And I think that's related to the political engagement scale, is that if you're more worried about your little piece of life, which is perfectly fine, you know, but you put that scale all the way down to zero. Yeah. I think you're closing off the world, which is a bad thing. Yeah. If you even just had it at 1%, just kept up with what was going on and were informed. Yeah. Maybe not even every day, but just like every week, kind of dipped your toe in to say, oh, how's the world doing right now? Then you're doing a little bit better than the type of people where he was describing, my friend, that I don't care about it. I can't fix it. It's like the world is burning outside my front door, but I don't care because all I care about is my home. And that isn't a way, like the isolationist view isn't a way to live in, especially in our, you know, globalist world. You know, just because things are happening over in Ukraine or things are happening over in Hong Kong. Like, those things might seem a world away.
Yeah.
But the implications of those things affect our world and on our doorstep.
But that leads back to the problem of I don't have enough. I'm only one person, and I don't have enough time and energy to fix or to even affect all the problems of the world.
But I think the takeaway should be, if anything, you should at least know what's going on. Whether or not you feel like you can affect the change, at least being informed of what's going on outside your own front door will help you. And then you can choose whether or not you want to go out and be in a picket line or fly to Hong Kong and pick up an umbrella, or if you want to do those things, or just if you want to have a discussion group, if you want to have a rally, if you want to, it's where on that scale you want to slide your own life. I think that being at zero is just a flat negative.
I still think there's an information problem with that, though. I mean, there's an infinite number of problems in the world, right? Essentially, not literally. There's an essentially infinite number of problems in the world.
Yeah.
So how do you know which ones to pay attention to and which ones not?
I'd say that's
except by the ones that affect you and maybe the ones that you're most passionate about.
I'd say that also equates to where you would put yourself on that scale. Like, if you are the type of person who only really cares about, let's say, your family and your community on a very basic level.
Yeah.
Anything that happens outside of those bounds, you're not going to be involved with.
Right.
But eventually, those things will seep in. But I'm not saying everyone. And I just want to be clear. I don't think everyone needs to be 100% engaged. I don't think they need to be 50% engaged.
Okay.
I think if the bare minimum of people were even 1% engaged, it would be better for everyone.
Yeah. You don't think 1% of people are engaged? Or you don't think don't think people are in general 1% engaged?
No,
oh, really?
No, I think a majority of people are disengaged.
That's interesting, because I would say that people... I think I disagree with that. To me, it seems like there's a lot of people who are too engaged.
I'd like to see the proportion. I mean, it just depends. Like there's a generational thing.
Yeah.
Like, younger people might be less engaged. There might be historically more engaged now than ever, but still, like, numbers wise, you know, you could go into a high school and ask however many people. Like, there was one story I read online where someone was wearing a pro Bernie shirt in, like, a town fair or something.
Yeah. And
a couple people were like, I didn't even know Bernie was running again. Mm-hmm. Like, that's how disengaged they are. They don't even know.
You think they've always been like that, though?
It just depends. I mean, it might be their age. Like, with me, I said when I was growing up as a kid, post 9/11, I kind of knew what was going on.
Yeah.
Like, I knew who the president was. I knew who Colin Powell was. That's like more than what I think a lot of kids might know when you're 13.
What about adults, though?
Adults?
Yeah. You think most adults are 0% engaged?
I think a lot of people that I've met in my life who aren't vocal about it, because people who are engaged are usually vocal.
Yeah. Are
just like, I don't have an opinion. My vote doesn't count. Like, I've heard that the "my vote doesn't count" line from a lot of adults.
That's
in my
interesting.
Life.
I don't think I've really experienced that all that much.
No.
And that's part of why we're kind of on different sides of this. Because basically, what I've been arguing for, in this podcast, is for people to be less politically engaged, because I see so much partisan bickering on Facebook and on social media, and in the media too, and anywhere online where there's any kind of commentary about this kind of stuff, just people bickering. Mm-hmm. I would say pointlessly. They're just ramping up the rhetoric, and they're becoming more, I would say, more ideological, more entrenched in their position, nastier toward each other, more outraged, and I think the world could go for a whole lot less of that. And I know that you're going to say that that's not political engagement per se. That's like fucked up political engagement.
Well, and what else I was going to say in relation to that is, like, just look at the percentage of turnout for voting.
I guess that is going down, right?
Yeah, it's been going down.
Yeah. And I would say, and that's not good. I agree that that's not good.
And I think a 1% would be voting.
Yeah.
Even just for the general election, just going out and voting. That's 1%.
Yeah. Well, I do think that I would like more people to vote. Yeah, I can agree with that much anyway.
Yeah, because the people who even just turn on and say, politics, that's 0%.
Yeah.
You know, you're not even, you won't even voice your own opinion enough to where you'll cast a vote.
Yeah.
You know, and I think that is a very prevalent part of America.
Mm-hmm.
You know, 50%, 40% vote turnout for the general elections, and even less for the midterm elections or small elections in your own community.
Yeah.
People, like, how many times have you voted for your mayor?
I don't think.
Do you even know who your mayor is?
I don't think I've ever voted for my mayor.
Do you even know who your mayor is?
I do, yeah.
Well, I don't know mine.
Yeah.
That's the thing. Well, you know, it's just the thing. A lot of people don't even know who the representatives are.
Right.
You know?
Yeah, and I would agree that that's a problem. I think if we're just going to... I mean, we've kind of been talking about how much people ought to be involved in politics this whole time. But if you're just going to... If I was going to put a general statement on it, I would say that people need to be involved enough to vote and to know who they're voting for and to know who's in charge. Yeah. Because if you don't do that, if you really do stick your head in the sand, then that is the time when some tyrant swoops in while you're not looking and makes everybody's life hell. So as long as... I would say that I want people politically engaged up until the point where that doesn't happen and no more.
Which is fine. And, like, that's a start. Yeah. Whether or not you go from 1% to 100%, which is you're running for an office somewhere,
yeah,
that's fine. If you're between 1 and 100, anywhere on there, I'm happy.
Yeah. Because
that means you don't have your head in the sand. B, you're not being isolationist with how you feel like the world affects you.
Yeah.
Because whether or not you vote, like what you just said, someone else will vote and things will change.
Right.
It might be quick, it might be overnight, or it might be systemic, it might take a long time.
Right.
But if you don't have some sort of engagement to say, when things do when you do see something that you know will affect you,
yeah,
and say, don't do that. That's wrong.
Yeah.
You know, and I didn't want to bring it to like that whole, you know, they came for the socialists, I didn't do anything.
Right.
They came for, you know, that no political engagement is where that in a statement came from in a nutshell.
In a democracy, in a representative democracy, we do have to be at least 1% engaged.
Yeah. And do I want compulsory voting? I don't know.
Yeah.
I'm not sure.
I don't think I do, because then you're going to get a bunch of people who know nothing voting because they have to, as opposed to the people who know nothing not voting because they don't want to. I would rather them not vote.
You sure?
I think, yeah.
Yeah?
Yeah.
The jury's...
I haven't thought a lot about it.
The jury's still out for me on whether or not I want compulsory voting in America. But I think if there was, it would force more people, I think, to be involved. Because they'd probably vote the first time and be like,
yeah,
man, you know, maybe I should know a little bit. I think the gut instinct for a lot of people might be just to learn a little. Mm-hmm. You know.
I guess, I don't know. I haven't really put that much thought into that. But
and I haven't seen the effects compulsory voting has on other systems. I think Chile has compulsory voting.
Yeah, maybe. I like the idea less the more I'm thinking about it just now. I wanted to push back a little bit on something else that kind of involves this.
Sure.
You're talking about... We've been talking about the view of just doing what you can for your corner of the world. And you're kind of calling that the isolationist view. And you kind of said... You're kind of saying that's fine, but... implying that there's more you can do.
Well, if you... keep your windows open, or, you know...
I don't know. I don't. Maybe this doesn't really apply to you, so I'm speaking more to the listeners now. But my view isn't that. I don't think that I want to take care of my corner of the world thing. I don't see that as a limited kind of isolationist or self-centered view of things. Like, I actually think that most people can do the most good in the world if they do that. And of course, I'm talking about everybody striving to do that. So, you know, we've been talking a lot about as if I'm sitting here isolating myself while everybody else doesn't care. But that's not what I want either. I want everybody to take care of their own little corner of the world. Mm-hmm. And then, and also, like, once you do that, then you can reach out too. I do very much think that too.
Yeah, and
I just think that the world would be... I think that's the best place to start with all of this. Instead of being so politically engaged and demanding our politicians to take care of our problems, I'm much more of the belief that we should be taking care of our problems. If we think something's a problem, we need to go out there and fix it.
Yeah. And I'm saying that political engagement is one way to do that.
Yeah.
But I know you weren't speaking directly to me, but just to to bring that back to my point of my isolationist view, is that from my friend's standpoint, it very much sounded like, I'm just going to take care of myself. Fuck the world.
Yeah.
That's the view. And that's what I'm saying is bad. Okay. That's isolationist. But when I say keep your windows open, like you can just stay in your house and take care of your life and worry about that, but keeping a weathered eye on what's going on around you, that's the 1%. That's what I'm saying. Like you don't have to listen to NPR. You don't have to watch CNN. I wouldn't want you to, or any of that stuff. You don't have to write your senator. I'd like you to know who your senator is.
Right.
You don't have to go to rallies. You don't have to, do any of that stuff. I'm not saying that you have to do that. If you're more inclined to, I'd say do that. Yeah. If you feel like, and I think, back to the idea of working in your corner, some people, and I think this kind of goes back not to empathy, but not necessarily in a negative way. Like if you only care about your family, that you're not empathetic.
Right.
But people who are more empathetic or more inclined to help the other or someone that isn't in my corner, who isn't a part of my direct family, those people I think are the ones who are more politically engaged. Yeah. The people on the the right who have this the religious view that if we don't do this, America's going to go down the shit heap. Yeah. So we have to be engaged. We have to put our views out there, and that's very strong. Like those people think that their views will save the soul of America, essentially. Yeah. Where people on the left are more of like, I think they more have that view of like, I just want to live my life. I don't want the government fucking with me. Yeah. But I think there's a lot of things that are being fucked up by the government, and we want those things to change. The only way we think they can be changed is by having a political revolution.
That's it. Well, we don't need to debate it. But other than I think that may be a feature of the fundamentalist Christian right. But
yeah, that's what I meant.
I actually think for the most part it's switched that progressive people are more likely to be politically engaged than people on the right. But
like the people who. Like the Trump side of things and how the voting base was bigger generally on their side than traditionally has been. Even though political turnout has been really low for a long time, it was higher.
Yeah.
With the right,
and maybe that's changing.
Yeah. And less so for the left because a lot of people on the left are like fuck Hillary Clinton.
Yeah. So I guess the reason I say that is because traditionally. I mean, by definition, people on the left are for change, whereas people on the right,
but I think the thing
are more for
staying the same. But I think that what I was talking about at the very beginning, when I talked about voting for Obama, is that a lot of lefties, more than people on the right, a lot of lefties, they vote in who they want, and then they're just like, we're done.
Oh yeah,
we don't have to worry about it anymore. We got our guy.
Yeah, you think that's? I think everybody does that.
I don't think the people on the right do as much.
Well, with this election,
I mean even traditionally.
Oh, really?
Even traditionally, I think that people on the right side of things who want things to stay the way they are, stay politically engaged, so that when things start to change, they can say something about it.
Maybe.
Or the people on the left are like, oh, it's fine, we got our guy in there.
Yeah, okay.
Clinton's in there. Yeah. He's going to fix the economy. We don't have to worry about it.
Yeah, you might be right about that.
Where I think the people on the right are very much more in tune.
Yeah, that could be the case. Yeah,
I think that. Looking at it from a lens of 2016 to now is kind of shifting that because everyone has been looking on what's happening. But traditionally, I'd say that people on the right have been way more vocal. They've been called the vocal minority for a long time. The Christian fundamentalists,
right? Which
I think that they, their version of conservatism has overtaken the Republican view. Do I share some conservative views? Yeah. Financial conservatism, the government not spending more than it gets, like that sort of thing, which is, a conservative talking point. Yeah. But if they didn't have that brand of, religious fundamentalism in there, I think that I would be more inclined to think a conservative way.
Yeah.
But it's so tainted by that for the past 30, 40 years that it's hard. Like, would I voted for Eisenhower? Probably.
Yeah, that's interesting, and another whole discussion, because I used to think that too. I used to be very much on the left, and that is kind of what I thought of the right. Is that it's mostly, the conservative, or mostly like the fundamentalist Christian types. But in the last couple of years, I've done a lot more investigating and reading on the right. To me, it seems like that's a minority. I hope it is.
Is it a vocal minority?
Yeah, I would say it's a vocal minority. Yeah.
Yeah.
I don't think most people on the right are that way.
I'd say that older Christians are probably lean more conservative anyway.
I mean,
Younger ones, though, it's a toss-up.
Yeah, I would say.
Because I've met people...
I agree with that.
In this generation, our generation, and the generation below us, who are still nominally Christian,
yeah,
but lean more socially left.
Yeah, I agree with that. And it could be just because they're young, because the young people tend to lean left too. But yeah, I agree with that.
But, the old guard of the GOP, is it the grand old party, right? That's...
Yeah.
Like, all of the old politicians in there, they may or may not believe in that, but they pander to it.
Yeah. Yeah, there's definitely a lot of that. Yeah, and that's why... That's a big part of the reason why I don't fit comfortably on the right either.
Mm-hmm.
As you may have gathered, I don't fit comfortably on the left anymore, and wouldn't consider myself on the left. But I do have... and I don't care. I don't really care where I am anymore, because I just care about individual issues, and I care about where I stand on things, and I care about the truth. But
yeah, which is fine.
Yeah, that's just an aside.
Yeah, which I don't condemn, because what you said in the beginning is that your political engagement is knowing where you stand,
right? And
some people don't even do that.
Yeah,
some people don't even dig enough into things on their own time just to figure out, if this question came up,
right,
how would I respond?
Right.
Like, how do I feel about X thing?
Yeah, and I guess just I don't know how we're doing on time, but something else I kind of wanted to hit upon is that I really do wish that people would know, as much as you're saying right now, enough to be informed and make informed voting decisions and things like that. But I sort of I have doubts that that's even possible for people, and people are just so busy with their own lives. It's hard to do that stuff. I mean, I've spent so much time and energy reading and thinking about that stuff and talking about that stuff. And I do think that it's been for the best. It has made me a better person, and it's made me a better force for good in the world, for lack of better terms. But if I was just a little bit busier in my life, if I had a couple kids, if I had, if I worked 60 hours a week instead of 40 hours a week, if I was taking care of sick parents or something like that, or some combination of those things, I wouldn't have any time for that stuff. And so I have a hard time being hard on people for not being more engaged on that stuff when they're so busy. Yeah. Now, if we're talking about people who are totally politically unengaged, but they spend all their time smoking weed and playing video games or whatever, then I'm going to be harder on them. But there's a lot of people that I have a hard time criticizing them for their lack of political engagement, because they just have so much on their plate already. Yeah,
and I think it comes down to, like, we had this conversation about reading, about how you want to spend your free time wisely.
Yeah.
And you personally, me personally, we spend it doing these different leisurely things, reading, writing, what have you. But some people, they spend their free time just getting more informed. And I think that there are people out there who do lead the life that you described, working a lot of hours, having children, whatever, but they still use as much time as they can to stay involved, because their view of it, and what I was trying to describe to my friend, again, if I can bring that up, is that he's like, oh, I got a kid, I have a girlfriend, I have a house, I have these things. And I'm like, politics, it might not, this kind of comes down to whether or not it directly affects you. It's like, it might not directly affect you now, but down the line it will. Mm-hmm. And knowing just a little bit or being engaged just a little bit will help you in your endeavor to care about your family.
Yeah.
And I was mostly railing upon his 0% engagement.
Right.
And I think that even just having a passing glance at what's going on in the world is a positive. You know, whether or not you know who the president of Venezuela is, mm-hmm. or the president of Brazil is during, you know, the whole downfall of Venezuela and the burning of the Amazon forest, that's not here or there. But to know who your senator is, or your representative, or just to know how your city is run, because that stuff does directly affect you.
Right. Yeah.
And I think that level of political engagement is kind of, you know, is where people should, you know, and I agree on your view that if people cared more about their own corner in certain circumstances, that things would kind of build their way up. Mm-hmm. Like if more people knew who their mayor was, who their city planner was, how things were done in their own community, and worked to make those things better, then that would slowly build out.
Right.
But there's this kind of backwards thing where we only really care about the biggest person in the country, the president, and don't care about who, you know, make sure that our city infrastructure is fine, that our water is flowing, that our roads aren't falling apart, that our school is staying up to date with its books. Like those things really do affect you and me on a daily basis, but people aren't engaged in those ways. Yeah. And I'd want them to be engaged.
That makes sense. I guess one final thing for me to add on that is that it's that no matter how much you know about that stuff, there's still very little that you can do about it, I think.
I think that just comes down to your temperament. Like if you think,
you can vote. I mean, that's
not even just voting, like doing community-based things.
Yeah. Well, okay. I meant very little you can do about it politically, I guess. Aside from voting
or running.
I guess you could running yourself.
Or, you know, going to town halls. Mm-hmm. You know, I want to combat the idea that there's nothing you can do. Mm-hmm. Like that's the big thing for me.
Yeah.
Is, you know, going against the people who say, my views don't matter, there's nothing I can do. There's a lot that you can do, but when you think about it in terms of, I can't run for president, no, but you can run for town hall, you can run for a school board, you could talk to people in the community, you could do those little things in your day-to-day, like you go to the supermarket.
And that's, well, I agree with that. I think maybe we're on the same page with this. It's just that I wouldn't consider a lot of those things political things. You know, like there's very little in my community that I can do politically, but I can donate books to the school, or I can take time out to teach some kids things after school, or teach my own kids things after school. Or, I mean, like I am very much, I'm not trying to downplay those things. Like I actually think that those things are the things you should do.
Yeah.
No, go ahead. I guess I wouldn't consider that political engagement.
And I'm saying that what people think of political engagement is can be a lot smaller than the big politic word.
Yeah,
you know, like people think, voting or rallying or you know, knocking on people's doors or, you know, running for office or doing contributions or all this. No. It doesn't have to be that big. That's in like the 70-80% engagement range.
Yeah.
The 10-20% around there, that's going to a town hall meeting when your town has one.
Right.
That's meeting and talking to your mayor or your city councilman or your school board and just knowing what's going on in your community.
Yeah.
You could do that on a Saturday or, you know, after church on a Sunday or something. Just like knowing what's going on in your community.
Right.
And just knowing that much can help build out from that base. And that's what I'm saying. Is like, if you slide the scale from 0 just to 1 and knowing like, oh, my mayor is so-and-so.
Right. Yeah, that makes sense. And my view of your little corner of the world and your influence over that includes that kind of stuff. I mean, like, that's what I'm trying to say. I'm trying to say, don't wait for the right politician to come along. If you see a problem in the world, just go out there and do something about it. That's where I'm at.
And I'm saying that those things might not
You're saying they're not mutually exclusive.
No. I'm saying that they are political, but just not in the way that political is, framed. Like, people think of political and they automatically think of senators and politicians and all that sort of.
Well,
but I feel like what is political is really more day to day than what people give it credit.
Yeah. Well, see, this is why I wanted to, at the very beginning, I wanted to kind of define what we were talking about. Because, see, I think this runs into one of those things where, well, if we call all this stuff political, then nothing is political. If everything's political, nothing is political. And so I just wouldn't consider that kind of stuff political.
I'm saying it's
but that's just
it's related to political engagement.
Yeah, it's just a semantic thing.
Yeah. But I think in the outset when I described that political engagement's a sliding scale.
Yeah.
That whether or not you want to include that in the scale is fine.
Yeah. Okay.
I'm not. That's not a hard and fast rule on my scale. Yeah. I'm saying it is. I'm saying community service. That's political.
Okay. Well. Okay. That's that's fair. I just wouldn't consider it political.
It's like being a representative. You're a community servant.
Yeah.
That's how I look at it. And I'm saying that the smallest things that you can do as a citizen in your country aren't just voting. You can do little things around your own community.
Right.
By running for office, which is obviously 100%, but just showing up and knowing what's going on, that's a level of political engagement.
Yeah. I think what I'm trying to say is that there's a lot you can do that has nothing to do with government specifically.
Yeah.
Which I think you would agree with.
Yeah.
But, yeah, I'm not trying to exclude any of that stuff. I'm not trying to say that you should ignore your neighbors and things like that. I just want to make that clear that I'm not suggesting that.
I hope that we didn't muddy up too much, but I think this was a good.
I think it was
good conversation.
Yeah, I think so too. I think we we have some differences and we have some common ground, and we got around to saying everything that I wanted to say. I think. Okay. Is there anything else you wanted to add?
Yeah, I think the only thing that I kind of wanted to touch on, is like what could be, a toxic level of engagement.
Oh, okay. We touched on that.
Touched on that a little bit, and I guess just kind of end on this since I talked about the sliding scale. If you're the type of person who is so politically engaged in your own corner, your own party or whatever, and you can't even give any quarter to an opposing view, then that's like being 120% involved, and like where you can't even have a conversation without it devolving into an argument. Like we don't have 100% agreement on what we on our political views, but I don't think this was an argument. This was a conversation.
No, it wasn't an argument at all. I mean, I don't feel at all
and obviously our levels of political engagement on that scale are different. I'd say I'm way more politically involved, engaged than you are. I actually wanted to say about my own political engagement as well is that I signed up to volunteer for Bernie Sanders.
Right.
If and when his stuff comes to this area during the election cycle, just so that I can have, I guess, not really one hand on the steering wheel, but just like knowing that I'm helping in this movement that I believe is important. Right. That's what I think of. Like I'm extending my corner of the world. To
and I'm not going to sit here and tell you that you shouldn't do that either.
Yeah.
But I agree that there's certainly, and I said this earlier, there's certainly a level of political engagement where it's detrimental to you.
Yeah.
And probably everybody around you. I mean, I would say that's when you become ideological. When you become so convinced that everything that you say is true, and that you're not going to listen to the other side, and that you're not willing to have a conversation, you're not willing to question your own beliefs. You force all the facts to fit your doctrine. That's when you've gone too far. And I would say that if you're on Facebook having pointless arguments with people, I'm not considering yours to be a pointless argument, because I thought that was actually a pretty good discussion. But if you're the kind of person who's constantly posting just angry things.
Propaganda, too.
Yeah, angry things about the other side. And I see this from the left and from the right, probably in equal measure.
Yeah.
If you're doing all that stuff, I think that's too much. And like I said earlier, I think that, I have a stricter definition of political engagement. I wouldn't consider all that community stuff political. But as far as talking about strictly political stuff, I think that you should be engaged right up until the point where you are able to make proper voting decisions and proper decisions about anything that might directly affect you, and then no more. After that, you should devote your time and your energy to the things that you have more control over.
Yeah, okay. I think that's a good place to leave off.
I think so too.
Yeah, I don't think I have anything else to say about that. I'm just going to say that I'm going to stay as engaged as I am.
Yeah.
I don't think we swayed each other really to be more or less engaged.
No. Here's something I will say though. I did not watch the Democratic debate last night, and
the third Democratic debate.
The third one, yes.
Because we won't post this.
Yeah.
After
Right. Yeah. This is probably going to be posted later.
A while.
But I will say though that I would have watched it with you, so that we could talk about it.
Yeah.
Yeah. I will say that. So I suppose in some way, that does mean you're having some kind of influence on it.
Well, maybe then we should watch the fourth one together.
Yeah,
in October.
maybe we can do that. Yeah.
You know, make a little
all right, we can
party out of it.
We can have some beers and
Yeah.
we can get on. We can send some tweets and we can
See. I'll end it on this. It's like the Twitter feeds during debates are probably my favorite Twitter feeds. Like everything else is like toxic and stuff, but you know, we can like rip on who's talking in our own political party.
Yeah.
And kind of have fun with it. I don't know. I liked it, but
I don't even have a Twitter.
yeah, that's like the only time I really tweet anymore is during political stuff.
Mm-hmm.
But I'll leave it on there.
Yeah, and as far as how politically engaged I'm going to be in the future, it shifts at times. You know, I become more politically aware at certain times, and with the election coming up, I'm sure that I will be a little bit more engaged, especially in my conversations with you. And I didn't watch the debate, but I do. Oh well, we didn't get into this, but the reason I didn't watch the debate is because I just don't get a whole lot of. I don't see the use of the debate. I will be watching podcasts and interviews and stuff with some of the candidates, just because I do care.
Like Bernie Sanders on Joe Rogan.
Right, I watched that, got a lot out of that. I don't even know that I'm going to vote Democrat when it comes down to it, but I am interested in that. I just don't really feel like I get much out of a debate. It's not really a well-spent 2 hours unless I'm going to be doing it, having beers with you.
Yeah. I think for me, we can end on this. I think for me, the idea of debates is just to see, how they present themselves, the candidates, how they present themselves on that stage.
Yeah.
And to see how the mass media, A, portrays them, and B, spouts their opinion. This kind of goes back to the beginning, where we talked about how we don't personally engage in mass media, because of how they are.
It's interesting, all right.
Yeah,
I'll give it that.
But as people, as we are in our level of insight into our own political views, we can look at that and not be swayed by them.
Right.
So it's more, for me, it's more I want to see how the candidates act. I want to see how the mass media portrays them, and so that I can have a greater discussion with, I was actually tweeting the people that I watch in independent media. Like those are the people I was having conversations with, so that we can talk about how mass media treats this system. And, that's another discussion we can have about, how the system works if we want to have another politics discussion. But
and I invite you to keep doing that. I'm not going to tell you not to.
And I won't force you to do it either.
Thanks. I appreciate that.
Yeah, because I think that's how it's to go both ways, is that unless it gets to... man, this is going to keep going. I want to end it, but I think we need to have our conversation about revolution. I want to have that conversation on the record about where we stand when it comes to my analogy about the house on fire.
Yeah,
and where our differing views are on how drastic change needs to come.
Yeah. Well, we should have a conversation about that.
I think we do. I'd like to, because I think it's an interesting conversation. Plus, it kind of helps me build out how revolutionary I really am.
Okay. Well, listeners, you have that to look forward to.
Yeah. So we'll bring that back to you in the future. But you guys have a great day, night, weekend, weekday, whenever you're listening to this. And
appreciate you tuning in.
We will be back with you for another episode of Subject to Change. And this has been Matt.
This is Chad. Talk to you next time.